This tutorial, This tutorial will help you on a select few problems on your homework on conditional statements. The first section wants you to identify the hypothesis and conclusion of each conditional statement. So the hypothesis, again as mentioned in class, is what follows the word if. The hypothesis follows the word if. So the hypothesis for this statement would be today is Monday. And then the conclusion is what follows the word then. So the conclusion would be yesterday was Sunday. Notice again the hypothesis does not include the word if, and the conclusion does not include the word then. So make sure when you write yours, you do the same. In this section, they want you to write each statement in if-then form. An acute angle has a measure less than 90 degrees. In if-then form, you could say, if an angle is acute, then the angle has a measure less than 90. The directions for this section say, determine the truth value of each conditional statement. If true, explain your reasoning. If false, give a counterexample. So on number 7, if I roll two six-sided dice and the sum of the numbers is 11, then one die must be 5. That, my friends, is a true statement, because whenever you roll two dice, your only options are 1 through 6, and the only way to get a sum of 11 when you have numbers 1 through 6 is taking 5 plus 6. And I mean, the only other way to get, there are other ways to get 11, like 8 and 3 and 7 and 4. But when you only have digits 1 through 6, 5 and 6 are the only ones. So that is a true statement. In this section, you're going to write the converse, inverse, and contrapositive of each of the conditional statement and determine the validity of each. Provide a counterexample whenever possible. The conditional reads, if two angles form a linear pair, then the angles are adjacent. So that in itself is a true statement. Sorry, I apparently have an extra one up here. Sorry. And the converse would read, if the angles are adjacent, then two angles form a linear pair. Which is not necessarily true, because not every pair of adjacent angles has to form a linear pair. The inverse. If two angles do not form a linear pair, then the angles are not adjacent. And again, that's not necessarily true. Just because it's not a linear pair doesn't mean it's not going to be adjacent ever. And the contrapositive, if the angles are not adjacent, then two angles do not form a linear pair. That is true because you have to be adjacent to form a linear pair. So again, just to recap, the conditional statement is true because if you're a linear pair, you have to be adjacent. The converse was false because just because you're adjacent doesn't mean you're a linear pair. The inverse was also false because just because you're not a linear pair doesn't mean you're not adjacent. And the contrapositive, if angles are not adjacent, then they do not form a linear pair. That's true because you have to be adjacent in order to be a linear pair. So again, this demonstrates that logically equivalent scenario because the conditional and the contrapositive have the same truth value. They're both true. And that's supposed to be the case because those two statements are logically equivalent. And then the converse and the inverse have the same truth value because those two are logically equivalent and they're supposed to have the same truth value. Well, this concludes your tutorial. I hope you're able to complete the rest of your assignment. Thank you.